What's up, y'all? Welcome back to The Long Defeat. Today, our guest is a good friend of mine, Gabriel León. He's a sixth year PhD candidate in clinical psychology at the University of Southern California. He's currently also a doctoral intern at the Stress, Trauma, and Resilience Clinic at the UCLA Semel Institute for Neuroscience and Human Behavior. Gabe and I met something like 10 years ago in undergrad at Grand Canyon University when we attended the same church and small group. We got close and found a kinship in asking hard questions that our compatriots didn't seem to be asking. Gabe provides trauma informed and evidence based care for children, adolescents, and families of all backgrounds. His research focuses on understanding the biopsychosocial processes through which parental stress affects family well being and child development. In the past, Gabe has also worked directly with helping formerly incarcerated parents during the reentry period. Welcome, Gabe.
Good to be here, Marshall. Good to see you, man.
Yeah, for sure, dude. I think actually our other than me pitching the podcast to you, I think our last conversation was probably 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, time is flying. It feels like time is accelerating, so it's hard to even track things anymore. But yeah, anytime we connect, it's lovely, man. We get have some good conversations.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I'm always appreciative of it. So, I know I'm coming at this all from a very different lens, somewhat in parallel, with the language that we use, but doing this internship, this residency that you're doing at UCLA, tell me a little bit more about that. I know what that looks like for, someone in nursing school or medical school or paramedic school. Like, I know what that looks like, but what does it look like for you as a clinical psychologist?
Yeah, so as you mentioned in the introduction, I'm a PhD student at USC, the University of Southern California. I'm near the tail end of my program. And the way it works is for the first, 4 to 6 years of the program, you're there at your institution, you're completing coursework, you're working on a lot of research. For us in clinical psychology, we're also getting clinical training. So we're working there at our in-house clinic at USC, and then we're also doing practicums out in the community. And then we're also working on our thesis and dissertation during that time as well. And then towards the end of the program, you apply for what we call a doctoral internship, but it's very similar to a residency for med students. For those who are familiar with that, we have to go through a very long application process. We're applying to internship sites, it could be all around the country. And then once you go through the application process, you interview at sites, then you participate in a match system. So you basically rank all the different programs by the order which you would want to attend them. And then all the sites will rank their applicants as well. That information gets put through an algorithm, which then matches everybody to a site. So I matched at UCLA, and it's a 12-month clinical program. It goes July to July. So I just started this past week. Um, and it's a clinical year, right? It's kind of your last opportunity in the program to deepen and enrich the clinical training you've received in a particular area, but then also broaden it as well. So get exposed to maybe different areas or populations that you haven't had training in yet. Um, so again, happy to be here. All my thoughts are my own. Thoughts and opinions are my own. They don't represent USC or UCLA or any of the other organizations I work with. But yeah, I'm happy to share more. I'll follow your lead on where you like to go.
Yeah, for sure. So in doing this, you're also working on a dissertation. What is that? Where are you at in that process?
Yeah, so for folks who are unfamiliar, a dissertation is like a big research capstone project. So it's typically quite long. It can be most are over 100 pages. Some I've even seen hit like 200 pages. For my institution, what's required is like three separate, like big research projects. So like each of the three projects would translate into a like a journal article, right? So if you're an undergrad and you're familiar with having to find journal articles, like we're the people who write those and publish those. And typically it's a bit of science that you do. You run a study, you collect data, you analyze the data, and then you write up the findings in a journal article. So you basically do that three times. Um, it all usually falls within a specific theme, and then that becomes your dissertation. So my dissertation is focused on the transition to parenthood. So if you think about individuals and couples specifically, um, when they get pregnant, I want to understand the different biological and psychological changes that these folks undergo from when they get pregnant all the way to, 6 to 12 months postpartum. It's the topic of interest of my advisor, Dr. Darby Saxbe, who recently just published a book called Dad Brain. Go get it at a bookstore near you. It was just published last month, and it's really tremendous. She's lovely, wonderful scientist. And that's her area of focus is the transition to parenthood. She specifically focuses on the transition that men and fathers undergo during that period because most of the research in the perinatal space is focused on mothers, and for good reason. They undergo the most biological, psychological, and social changes during that period of time. So they focus more on the mother-infant connection. So it left this kind of gap in the literature for fathers, and we didn't really know exactly what are the changes that fathers undergo during this period. And so that's the focus of my mentor's research. As I mentioned, she wrote a book about it. And as her trainee, I work in her laboratory, so I help with a lot of the different data collection we do. So we've recruited families from throughout the Southern California area who've been like participating in our studies for years at this point. Some parents started coming in when they were pregnant with their first child, and we've even done up to 7-year follow-ups with those same families. So they come into the laboratory. We put them through various discussion tasks. We ask them to answer various questionnaires. So we learn about different dimensions of psychology. Will screen for different like depression, anxiety symptoms, stress, etc. We also do neuroimaging components. So both dads and then now 7-year-olds will go into the brain scanner. So a lot of different moving parts to this study. But that's the data that I'm analyzing for my dissertation. So I'm focused specifically on couples communication dynamics, to put it broadly. If you can, so my interest is in understanding how are couples' communication dynamics kind of evolving during the prenatal period? How do they change once the baby arrives? And more specifically, can we identify what prenatal communication dynamics predict couples that will weather this transition to parenthood the best? And I say weather because it can be very stressful, right? There's a lot of different changes to your sleep patterns. Um, there's changes that have to happen to couples' division of labor expectations, changes to the daily routine. It may interfere with your sex life. There's all these different changes that folks undergo, and some folks may be able to weather that transition better than others. And I wanted to see, well, if we observe couples during pregnancy, how they interact with one another, how they respond to one another, how they deal with conflict, does that then give us some insight into how they'll be several months later? And the whole reason I'm doing this research is that, we can actually inform interventions that are poised to help couples during this period. Let's say you have like a couples intervention for folks who are pregnant with their first child, and you target very specific kinds of communication patterns, just trying to tweak them a little bit so that that couple can then, several months later be able to weather stressors better. So that's the long version. Hoping to get that work published too in various journals in the months and years to come. But yeah, that's a look into the different topics that I work on.
Cool. Very cool. And exciting. I think we kind of talked about this before pressing record, but our friends, many of them, are becoming parents for the first time. So uh, it's exciting to know that there are ways to help them when things come up, or even just to understand what they're going through. Because I was actually just talking with a good friend of mine from GCU yesterday about how friendships in adulthood change, and sometimes that change, while difficult, is unavoidable because uh, now my friends are married. They have kids, and because of that, we can't be as close as we want to be. But sometimes I think understanding uh, what is going on in somebody else's world helps me to relate to them in a better way. Um, is this research helping you kind of understand the people around you better in a way that you could articulate here?
Yeah, good question. Research is interesting because it's truly uh, oftentimes we end up going down a very narrow path. We end up focusing on very specific kinds of research questions, right? So like I'm doing a study right now, or I guess I'm working on publishing it, on what I call validation. So whenever couples are having a conversation and one partner is sharing something, maybe it's something stressful that happened at work, or maybe it's like an issue they have with like something their partner does, or an issue in the relationship. They're disclosing it. How does the other partner respond? Do they respond with contempt? Do they kind of check out emotionally, verbally? Or are they attentive to what their partner is sharing, right? Are they keyed in? Are they what I would call actively listening? They're showing through various like nonverbal channels of communication that what their partner is disclosing is important to them, right? Um, that is one piece of what I would call validation, a validating response, right? And so that's like one just tiny dimension of like how people and couples communicate. So research sometimes feels like you're looking through a microscope. Um, and in order to make it meaningful to like a broader audience, you have to pull it out and kind of integrate it into like a bigger body of knowledge. So to your question, I think I learned the most from actually clinical work because that's quite different. That's like you actually working face to face with people in the real deal, like the daily stressors. Like if I'm working with parents, it's every day could or every week could be a new crisis, a new stressor, a new hurdle to have to go over or deal with. And then kiddos too, right? Like you kind of touched on it, but we always try to take what I call like a developmental perspective or see things through a developmental lens. So like the human lifespan, we go through all these different periods and changes, right? So even what you alluded to, like when you're a college student, it's a little bit easier to make friends, make connections. You might meet hundreds of people, for example, when you start college, right, for the first few weeks. But then when you're in your later 20s and your 30s, a lot of folks will report, man, it's kind of hard just keeping up with friendships because I got so much I got to do. I work, I have kids, I have my marriage. Um, it's hard to just keep up with friendships, let alone make new ones, right? So that's a developmental change. It's a developmental difference, and you have to see it that way. So with kids too, right? Uh, it's quite obvious, but as kids go through these different transitions and stages, you have to apply a different lens when working with them. So all of that teaches me a lot, I think, about, human behavior and just it informs, I think, how I make decisions in my own life too. Um, More than the science, I would say. But I love the science. I'm a nerd. So I love getting in the weeds with data and making sure I'm applying the right method to analyze that data and double checking everything. That's my jam just as much as it is working face to face with folks.
Then, yeah, I think uh, research is fascinating. And even I talked about this with one of my mentors in the era of AI, where we can do an insane amount of data analytics with all of these algorithms that we have and all of this automated system, automated systems. There is an art and a necessary component in the humanity of the clinician integrating that research both in the psychology world and in the medical world, because somebody could know all of the research about hypertension, but if they can't present it in the room with a patient in a way that is um, digestible or meaningful or human, I guess is the word that I would use there, to encapsulate everything that I'm going for. Without that human component, the research does nothing. And one question or curiosity I have about some of the research that you're doing is, how does that research get disseminated to the everyday person in middle America? So you're studying how these this this transition into parenthood and all of these different stressors, and how we could tweak their communication styles just a little bit to help them weather these stressors better. How does my neighbor Joe in middle America with his wife get the benefit of the research that you're doing, and how can I talking to you now, how can people listening participate in disseminating that research?
Yeah, great question. A very meaningful one. I think it's one that scientists do and should reflect on, because you could get into this problem where you're doing the like awesome research, super like methodologically rigorous, well-powered studies, but if they just sit in an academic journal, uh, a journal that might even be behind a paywall, how much good is it actually doing in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think science communication is a very important skill, and I'll shout out my mentor, Dr. Darby Saxbe again. She's like wonderfully like talented at communicating research and science, and one way to do that is through like writing books that you can like pick up off a shelf at a Barnes and Noble or a local bookstore. Part of it could be writing articles for more mainstream outlets, things like the New York Times, or doing little spots for outlets like that. I know, like, for example, websites like Psychology Today, there'll be a ton of articles on there just for like regular people, distilling science into kind of more layman's terms that can folks can easily digest. I think one little caveat I would add, though, is it's important as scientists to be ethical and disciplined with what you share and how you share it, because it's very easy to use your voice of authority to stretch, extrapolate, um, maybe portray science in with a degree of certainty that the evidence may not actually warrant, right? And I'm what I sometimes I end up being like the fun police, I say, because I'm quick to point out like, well, I don't think we have the evidence to make that strong of a claim, or from the average person's perspective, they don't know. They take your word for it. They trust, what you say has evidence behind it because of the PhD after your name. Um, but it's not always the case. It's complicated, man. Like even what I was describing about like couples who validate one another, how do you measure that, right? Like how do you measure it effectively? Do you give someone a questionnaire that asks them how much they validate or feel validated from their partner? That's one way to do it, but there's limitations to that, right? People may have retrospective biases. They're unable to remember. They may overestimate how validating they really are, or maybe even underestimate how validating their partner is. So what maybe you can videotape them, right? And then have research assistants go through and use like a structured manualized protocol to measure and evaluate how validated couples are. But then that carries its own biases, right? Your research assistants have their own perspectives, and you try to limit that. You try to make the, coding system as not as objective as possible. But those are just a couple examples where it's like it's hard to even measure stuff sometimes, let alone diagnose and identify how things unfold for folks in relationships and in families. So I always try to, when engaging with scientific communications, like on a podcast like this, um, come at it from a perspective of humility, and a little bit of sober thinking, and try to be honest too, because people don't want to be. People sometimes may hop on the first thing they hear. But no one likes to be given stuff that's half true, right? Or won't actually work, or provide a false sense of assurance that this will address that issue that you're looking to solve in your life. Um, yeah, I think that's just the most honest thing to do.
Yeah, yeah. A, somewhat related. I guess I'm from knowing you for the last, I think probably 10 years. I don't know. I'm trying to do the math in my head
At
now. I'm getting
least,
distracted.
at
Yeah.
least. Um, yeah, man, it's crazy. Holy moly. The
Yeah.
pandemic was 6 years ago.
Yeah. Isn't
That's
that
wild.
wild?
That's so wild. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. But yeah, it's been a while, man. We've both gone through a lot of different evolutions and
Yeah.
different stages of life during that period.
100%. Yeah. Thank you for being there for me through all of them. I know, just before I moved to Denver here in 2020, you and Sam were so kind and generous to me, and I cannot thank you enough for that. And I actually do bring you up from time to time in conversation because of some of the things that you said to me in that time. One of them in particular is uh, I have this tendency to be mean to myself, and you said, dude, if someone else said what you just said to you, um, in front of me, I would kick them out of here. Like, you don't get to talk to my friend that way. And I say that all the time. I'm like, don't talk about my friend that way. Um, you have become part of my story, and I'm so grateful for that. Um, and as I'm thinking about you and your story, um, could you are you tying like threads through like little Gabe to where Gabe's at now? What are the threads that you're finding follow you all the way through? We met in the church world, and then I've seen you, evolve into this, whether that was like doing undergraduate work or master's work, now PhD work. Like, I've seen this evolution of Gabe, and some of it I'm able to identify in some of the research and the volunteer work that you've done working with families. But what are some of the threads that you're tying from where you came from to where you ended up now?
Yeah, that's a good question, man. I feel like there's so much that goes into it. I mean, I think part of it has just been happenstance, if I'm
Mm,
honest. Like, life will life, and you sometimes
hmm
end up in positions you never thought so. Like if I had looked, a decade earlier, even 15 years earlier, like I was a teenager, high school or something, and told myself, I'd be a clinical child and family psychologist, right? I'd be like, what, for real? That's kind of, my mind's kind of blown. We kind of find our way. I think part of it is I wanted to do something where I feel like I was making an impact, but that also matched my talents and skill sets. And that's, like everybody. But the thing about what I do is like, on the one hand, it's very like technical and nerdy. Like a lot of times I'm behind the computer, I'm analyzing data, I'm running projects, and managing teams, I'm writing like scientific journal articles, and that's like very technical work. And now that I'm getting into more even more technical skill sets like natural language processing and like the stuff that goes into like the different AI tools that we use, you sometimes feel like you're adjacent to the computer science realm, statistics realm, even though my colleagues in those areas would obviously blow me out of the water with what they know. But then again, I also will switch hats, and now I'm like, you know, working with child clients, doing elements of play therapy, or it's just so it kind of touches both of those things where I feel like I can make a difference on the one-on-one with families. Hopefully I try to show up in the best way I can. I try to provide the highest quality care I can that's evidence-based. That feels, I guess, one bucket of meaning, as well as, I get to kind of do more of the nerdy and mathematical and analytical um, tasks as well that also contribute to people's well-being, but just on the back end, right? You're doing research that can help us learn more about human behavior, family, stress, health, and then that information can then be leveraged to develop better interventions for families across the spectrum, and like for me, and this kind of ties it all back together, I'm motivated to try and help parents, kids, and families who need the help the most, who
hmm
are in one way or the other going through it. For example, parents, like maybe they're dealing with their own past traumas, post-traumatic stress symptoms, anxiety, depression, financial insecurity, housing insecurity, um, challenges with substance use and addiction. It runs the gamut, and I'm like, all those experiences are like quite unique and like very challenging relative to like the average parent's experience, right? How do we do the best for them, right? How do we provide the best kind of care for them? And all that needs to be grounded in good, rigorous science that is what I would call person centered, right? It's not just me doing science so that I can steal the data and publish it and get a job at this highly esteemed institution. It's like, no, 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 no. All this is grounded in actually serving people, right? Um, and I think that's what I kind of always just wanted to do in the back of my head with whatever career I chose. And so being able to do that to any small degree that I can, um, I feel privileged to be able to do that. And I'm from, I don't know if this is mentioned, but I was born and raised in New Mexico, in the South, a town called Alamogordo. I love New Mexico. I rep it. I rep where I'm from. And a lot of just the challenges and experiences that I saw in my own family,
Yeah.
both immediate and extended family, dealing with various challenges, addiction, mental health issues, so on and so forth. I won't belabor the point, but that just kind of put that drive in me to want to maybe help other families who might be experiencing similar things or more severe. Um, and I focus specifically on like parents and kids because we aspire to, and we use the language of break the cycle, right? Break that cycle of intergenerational trauma or intergenerational poverty, etc. I mean, you know, it sounds grandiose when you put it that way, but really the nitty gritty is just like, how do we help parents to heal? How do we help them show up for their kids in the best way they can, um, so that their kids can be set up for the best life possible? And if you do that and you multiply that out, like that can change generations. So, um, again, these parents are the ones who do the work. They inspire me. These parents and families and kids too. They inspire me. We're just one little piece of the puzzle, but um, that's like the big mission. That's the big mission.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, so many good things.
Yeah, I'll keep going. You gotta cut me off because I'll just
Yeah.
keep rolling.
No,
But
it's
these are
so
great
good.
questions.
Yeah. I think what I'm trying to get at with this podcast, and honestly, like even if I'm not behind a microphone for these conversations, what I'm trying to get at is let me walk a mile in your shoes, right? Like let me give me a window into what it's like to be human from someone else's perspective. And I think that that makes me a better person. For me specifically, I think that will make me a better healthcare professional. I think it will help me um, in so many ways. And I think that you have so many different windows into the human experience from uh, your work with parents and families, children, your volunteer work with Homeboy Industries in LA, um, and we can stay here at this like 30,000 foot view that we've been at here, and talk about it, and that's really beautiful and amazing and impactful conversation. But I also think that zooming in, getting really granular also helps. So hearing anecdotes of an individual or a family or a child um, can help me to understand anyone that I've come across in my daily life, in clinical settings for me, or people that I run into on the internet or whatever it is, right? Like we as people encounter people in a lot of different settings, and humanizing them, understanding the complexities and the variety of human experience is meaningful to me, and I want to share that. That's why I'm behind a microphone for this. Um, when you think about things, stressors like becoming a parent or a parent who's incarcerated or uh, fill in the blank, are there stories that come to your mind that are like, man, this one changed me? And if you could describe that story and describe the change that it made, I think that that would help me, and I think it would help people listening.
Yeah, I'll give a little bit of background too, because you mentioned Homeboy Industries. So for listeners at home, um, for about 3 years or so, while I've been here in Los Angeles, I was able to volunteer at Homeboy Industries, which is the largest gang rehabilitation program in the world. Um, has a very rich history. They've helped thousands upon thousands of people here in all over from all over California, to be honest with you. Um, but what I was able to do is I helped to co-facilitate a group for parents. So parents who are formerly incarcerated, gang involved, they may have been like participants in the 18-month program there at Homeboys, but they also may have just been members of the community that wanted to join. And these are parents with kids of all ages, tiny babies all the way to parents who had adult children. And I won't I know you mentioned about specific details or anecdotes, but I will say, I don't speak for Homeboy Industries, but for those who aren't familiar, you can just go on YouTube. Homeboy Industries has a YouTube page, and I think the very best way to learn about that space and the people there, um, is to watch some of the homies and the homegirls tell their stories. There's plenty of videos there for folks to watch, and it's very difficult for me to put into words just how special it is there, and how inspiring it was to just be around those folks on a weekly basis. Myself and my co-facilitator, we would start every group just acknowledging how privileged we felt to be welcomed into that space. We would always share that, we're trained to work with kids and families. We have experience working with kids and families, many of whom have experienced various kinds of stress and trauma. And we weave that training in every now and then, evidence-based best practices and whatnot. But we weren't what made that class what it was. The magic was with the folks who came through those doors because they were the experts of their lived experience, right? They had seen and experienced things that maybe me and my co-facilitator never did. And we wanted to elevate that perspective, right? Because the most inspiring moments, getting back to your point, is when I saw parents who came through the class and maybe on their first few days is just like a little bit, you know, a little bit more reserved, a little bit more like feeling it out. What do we think of these two? What is a PhD student? Like, why are they here? Like, they don't know me, they don't get me. Um, Slowly begin to feel comfortable opening up and being vulnerable in that space, not because of us necessarily, me and my co-facilitator, but because of others in the class who'd been there for maybe a while, and they show the courage of sharing their own stories, sharing what they're going through, being vulnerable. And I mean, it makes me even, emotional thinking about it, but it provides a space for other parents to say, whoa, I get that. That person gets what I'm going through. Oh, wow. Like, maybe I can share what I'm going through now. And like, that was where the magic was at, right? Because it was allowing those folks to just see and be seen by one another and share their bits of wisdom. Like, it's like there's so much love and wisdom to be shared. And me and my co-facilitator might say something, but it carries much more weight when it's coming from another member of that community, right? Because there's that trust element there. And so we just tried to hold space for that. And God, there's so many examples. Like, I think what was most gratifying though is when you see folks who've had to deal with the child welfare system firsthand. And I can think of
Mm.
some experiences. And they have a lot of just institutional knowledge and wisdom that they know from going through that. And then we would get a new parent who's like, yo, I am in this DCFS situation. What do I do? And you just have these parents who maybe been coming for a while step into action. And they're just like, yo, this is what you need to do. This is who you need to talk to. Like, do this, don't do this. Like, we believe in you. Like, you're going to get them back. Like, because, a lot of these parents are trying to reunify with their children. And you just see them cut, like, almost like just put an arm around each other. You can't manufacture that. It's like that's part of the pieces that makes Homeboy so special. Those would really, I mean, I can go on and on about like the different things that just left an impression on me as a person and as a clinician too. Um, but that was really special watching folks with same experiences come around one another. And then, as folks graduate out of the 18-month program, maybe there's certain parents who don't come to our class anymore because they've like been placed in a job. And so then the cycle continues. So then the people who are new now have been coming for a while, and
Yeah.
then they help to shepherd and give game to the next, you know, group of people that are coming through. And that was always also just breathtaking. So yeah.
Yeah, this kind of goes to an earlier point you made of how healing happens in families, but it also happens in communities in generations, right? My therapist once told me that all healing happens generationally, or all healing is generational. So you see this happen in families where from parent to child there is incremental healing. Sometimes those increments are huge, right? Like some people carry the torch so far for their families that it is admirable. Some people uh, are faced with so much trauma, stress, that carrying that incremental healing maybe doesn't go as far. And then it also happens in communities, right? With these folks at that group that you held. Generations of that group then allow the next generation to heal again. Um, I find that so compelling. Um, and I'm even in my head I'm tying all this together with your story and things that we've talked about or books that you've shared with me, whether that's uh, uh, Father Greg Boyle wrote Tattoos on the Heart, or I've forgotten who wrote it, but the clinical psychologist who wrote Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. Like, there are incremental changes throughout generations. Um, how are you, how does knowing that influence the way that you carry yourself in your own life, carry yourself in the clinical setting, knowing that healing is uh, a long, lifelong, beyond lifelong, it's lifetimes long process. How does that change the way that you um, are a person?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think number one, well, first of all, that what you named, which is the both healing and pain is intergenerational, right? When you help folks to heal, or at least play a small part in that, um, if they're parents, like not only are you helping them heal, but you're also helping them to, we always use this analogy. Well, I shouldn't say we always. My co-facilitator brought this to our class, and it ended up becoming a recurring motif or question that we pose, which is the invisible suitcase. Which is like we all carry around an invisible suitcase with us. It's stuff that was did to us, shown to us, stuff that we grew up with, our parents, our caregivers left with us, or maybe stuff that they didn't give us because it wasn't there. And we carry that around with us, and um, without awareness, sometimes we'll just pass that invisible suitcase on to our kids or the next generation. And one of the things that we hope to do is like work with folks so that they're at a place in their healing where they can open up that suitcase and identify what they want to pass on and what they want to take out. And because life is complex, right? Like maybe you had a childhood filled with a lot of various kinds of things that you hope not to pass on, experiences, traumas. But maybe there's not everything. Maybe there's things you do want to pass on, right? A caregiver's sense of humor, um, a language that you were taught, um, but maybe not other things. Maybe not how you were treated by your caregivers or some of the things you saw. And that's powerful, man, because that's powerful because then now you're breaking that chain, right? You're breaking that chain and you're redirecting, the generations in a more positive direction. Um, and it's very hard to do that though when you're in like survival mode. When you're in survival mode, when you're just trying to make ends meet, when you're just trying to deal with your own stuff, you can't really think. You got to just focus on surviving. But through therapy and through healing, like we try to allow folks to come to a space where they can slow down and they can actually reflect, process, get better, dream, think about the future in a way that's beyond just the immediate. But like, where do I want to go? What do I want to leave for my kids? Who do I want to be for my child? Right? Like, we work a lot on like folks' sense of identity. Like, like if you could just paint a picture of what does your best self as a parent look like? What does that look like? How would you show up? Right? Like, obviously, we can't live into that ideal every day. It's very hard, but what are we striving for? Right? Like, all that can be done, but only when folks are given space to slow down, and work on it. So I don't even remember the initial question there. But I guess bringing it back to my own life. First of all, I may be on this podcast sounding like the a sage or whatever, like as if I have it all together. I don't. Like the people who may be listening who know me the most is like know all of my flaws and like think the day to day when I don't live into this. But I think the ideal though would be to try to understand that like people are not just what you see on the outside, right? They're a product of a lot of different things, a lot of different experiences. And this is something we work on with parents too, which is like with kids, right? It's very easy to see the behavior on the outside. They're getting kicked out of school, they're getting into fights, um, they're getting caught with vapes in their backpack, so on and so forth, right? It's very easy to see the behavior, but like what's underneath it? Like what's beneath the behavior? If we stop and reflect, like what are the thoughts, feelings, emotions that lead someone to act the way that they do? If you do that, it doesn't just like not only does it provide you with empathy, but it also provides you with understanding and how to help, how to engage, right? How to help fix, correct what might be going on in the case of your child. Maybe they're ditching that class because someone has been bullying them for months and they don't want to bring it up, or they think the teacher thinks they're stupid and
Yeah.
that's why they're not going to first period, right? Like that changes things a lot. Um, that principle applies to everything, right? Like when we're just going out in life, it's easy to just condemn. It's easy to just point a finger and be like, that person's either crazy, evil, stupid, all of the above. But building that muscle of just kind of like thinking what's underneath the behavior could help you to learn something, maybe make a friend, build a relationship, build a connection. And I think that's essential to well-being, which is connection. And I think it comes with humanizing one another. So even though we see a lot of crazy stuff going on, and I'll call things out when I see it, but at the end of the day, it's important to remember that um, people are people, and on the face to face, like actually like meeting people in your community, I think it's very important to humanize wherever possible. Um, and just tying it back to like it seems so obvious, but like that's the homeboy industry's way, as far as I understand it. It's like you could read Father Greg Boyle, who he's the founder of Homeboy Industries. He's written a lot of like books, like you mentioned, like Tattoos on the Heart, and his latest book is, I think, Cherish Belongingness. which
Yeah,
speaks a
I
lot to
think you're
these
right.
very topics. If you, it's got like a blue cover. Check it out if you haven't already. But a big part of that is like when you're with someone, like for example, you're with someone at Homeboys, is like try to really like my goal. And again, I didn't do this all the time, but my goal was to try and show the people that I interacted with that um, I cared about them, that they had my attention. To the best of my abilities, right? Like I'm obviously juggling a lot of different responsibilities in my role as a PhD student, but just like showing people that like they are cherished, whether it's with what you say, but mostly with what you do, how you treat them, how you show up for them. Like that matters immensely because a lot of folks, not just there, but everywhere, don't always get that, or they're told by the world that they're not worth a darn, or they don't deserve that attention, or they don't deserve to be cherished. And even that in and of itself, the process of feeling like you have value, that someone cares, that someone does cherish you, that you are funny, that you are intelligent, that you are kind, that you are whatever, fill in the blank to somebody else, um, I think is a huge contributor to just like feeling like this life is worth living. So it's a very roundabout way of discussing just like the type of things that I take away from like the work that I've done and whatnot. And again, I have to just point out too, but I'm also human. I lose my cool. I forget all these things on a daily basis and have to constantly like remember. Um, I don't show up for people in that way all the time, but it's stuff that I think rings true if we return to it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the there are a couple of ways for me that help me to remember this. Like, I think being human is a remembering of these lessons that we've learned, um, and a forgetting of the lessons that we've learned, or maybe a remembering that we've forgotten the lessons we've learned. However you want to say that. Um, I think one of the practices that I've learned to help with that is mindfulness. Being mindful and being present in every moment helps me to uh, give the space when I'm in the clinic. It helps me give the space for somebody who needs some space to be human and needs some space to take up because I work with people experiencing homelessness. They don't get much space pretty much anywhere. So giving
Yeah.
them that space is really meaningful. Another
I
way,
didn't even know that. I didn't know that that was what you were doing.
yeah,
So yeah, that's exactly it. Like those exact kind of like populations of communities of folks. It's like I know that we both are in like client facing or patient facing like roles, or we will be. And I don't have too much experience working with like medical folks, like on the medicine side of things, but I do think that coming from the psychology perspective, it's almost like second nature that like the relationship is the foundation, right? Like if I don't have buy-in, if I don't have trust, if someone isn't willing to let me in, I can't do my work. We can't go anywhere, right? And I think it goes for all disciplines where we're interacting with patients or clients. Like that is key. Like, but where is that built? Like that trust is built through showing people that they are cherished, that they do matter. And again, it's a show don't tell, right? We talk is cheap, but like, are you on time? Do you do what you say? Are you um consistent? Do you do the little things? Do you pay attention? Do you remember names? Do you remember family members' names? Like all that stuff goes into that bucket. And like I said, I fail at that all the time. I'm not gonna lie to you, but when you have that though, and I think about this with like teenage clients, for example, like that is one of the populations where I feel that the most, where it's like you might have a lot of like tall walls initially, but once you build a trust with a teen or an adolescent, like it's it becomes like a rock solid type of therapeutic relationship, you know? and you see just like I think teenagers are wonderful. Like I think that like they're just so interesting and going through so many different changes, and so there's so much we can learn from the youth, you know, at that age, I think, as adults. Um, yeah, so now I'm just kind of riffing, but uh, yeah, that's cool. I didn't know that that was the work that you've been doing lately.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been tremendously impactful. It's kind of focused the direction that I want to go with my career as a future doctor. I don't like I would love to work with unhoused people. Uh, in what setting that is, I don't know. Uh, but it has certainly um, helped me remind me what matters. And some of it comes from uh, the worldview I was handed. While I wouldn't call myself Christian at this point, the gospel and the person and work of Jesus changed everything for me. And the way that he talks about the least of these, um, I kind of forgot for a while how much that meant to me and how much I wanted that, how beautiful it is to find these people at the margins and bring them in. Um, and I didn't want this job when I took it. Well, that's a lie. I It wasn't the number one job that I wanted when I was interviewing for jobs. I took it, and it has helped me find myself in some ways that I didn't know I needed to. And so, whether I end up working with people experiencing homelessness or other underserved communities, whether that's, in America, the maternal mortality rate is disproportionately affecting Black mothers or Black birthing people, or rural America has a pretty similar set of um, problems or unique problems to underserved people in urban America. Um, yeah, it's been super cool, and it will definitely be there for the rest of my career.
It's amazing, man. That's amazing. I think you alluded to this as well, like, and I relate to you on this level of you know, my own relationship with God and Christianity is complicated as yours might be as well. But the when we connected at GCU and in the years following, kind of being involved in the church, the evangelical church, as much as we were, and like for me, like I was all about it, man. Like I knew the Bible really well and um, was embedded in both the doctrine and the praxis, you know. And there are certain like things I think that have stuck with my character no matter what, and I'm very thankful for that. I'm very grateful. Like I remember learning a lot about like the theology of I don't remember what exactly you would call it, but was it Andrew Ladd? But anyway, that's like the doctrine of the kingdom of God, where it's like the idea was, and this is like NT Wright type stuff too, which is, you know, God kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. So like Jesus came,
Yeah,
established the kingdom, and then the kingdom itself, you know, as it's expanding and growing, is a part of the whole restoration process of creation. You know, not just like people's individual souls, but all of creation was being redeemed through Christ, you know, and I thought like that was so cool because it was like you um as a piece, as an edifice, as a, you know, a part of the royal priesthood in like First Peter language, like you are a participant in that, and it's like God and Jesus are like the main characters. Obviously, they're the cornerstone, but like you are a participant in that reclamation process, and by doing so, you know, worship God and reflect His attributes out into the world. And I liked it because it was very like active. It was like we are a part of something, and so it matters then how you treat people. It matters then how you display virtue, not to get brownie points or whatever, but it's like you're an agent of that restoration. And then I think in a way like that's kind of always stuck with me. um, so as not to like sell out on my ideals or anything, for like material gain or anything like that. But it's like sticking to trying to make an impact, trying to leave the world in a better place than I found it. It's rooted a lot, in that belief. And I'm grateful for that. I'm very grateful for that. Just one of many things.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I know for both of us, the uh the process of getting to where we're at now from where we were was, for me, it was an inelegant process, and it was painful, and it was hard to kind of sift through all of this stuff to find what I wanted to keep and what I wanted to toss out. So, like, kind of coming back to the language of that invisible suitcase. Like, I was handed this
Yep.
worldview, um, and with that worldview came some doctrine that I just can't keep taking with me. And with that doctrine came practices that I just can't keep keep carrying with me, or ways that it made me think about the people around me in certain ways, or treat them in certain ways, or I saw people in that world treating my neighbors in certain ways that I just was like, man, I don't want this. I'm done. And that was a painful process, and it was hard. And I think, uh there were so many people going through that with me at the same time. You and so many other people, even people that I have never met, artists, right? Like, who were going through this, um, in our generation, going through this like disillusionment with this worldview we've been handed. And um, art has been a window for me into humanity in a pretty profound way. Episode 2 of the podcast, which as of recording has not come out yet, is a conversation with Levi McAllister about how he, as an artist, is able to transform the suffering that he has experienced or witnessed, transforming that suffering into art. Um, and so, for me as a listener, um, there are pieces of art that give me a window into the human experience in a pretty profound way. And, the ones that we have talked about, I think we've talked about hip hop is one of the things that we've talked about over the years. And as I was, listening um, to Pimp a Butterfly, The Art of Peer Pressure, or there's a song on Kids See Ghosts where Kid Cudi talks about how gang violence hurts everyone. It hurts family members on both sides. It hurts individuals, the individuals who are actually um, engaged in this violence. Or even like MCs like Rakim, has a personal experience and history of being a stick-up man, and he talks about that in his music. Um, what I would love to hear, and I'm always looking for new music or whatever, like, what are some pieces of art that have given you a window into the human experience, that you find meaningful or would like to share?
Wow, that's a really good question. Hmm. Yeah, I've always been a fan of rap music and hip hop for sure. I listened to it a lot growing up. I was always I have a bunch of half siblings, and my half siblings are like much older than me. So when I was little, the early 2000s or so, I'd hang out with my older sisters, for example. They'd always have rap music playing. Um, Back in those days, it was Dr. Dre, Eminem, Ludacris, Tupac. So I think I always kind of had this like it's always a part of my in my rotation, right? And as I just got older and reflecting, I think it is interesting because, for example, I'm not black. I don't have that lived experience, but you're able to hear pieces of it through media and through music, and obviously hip hop and rap being um, predominantly a reflection of Black artists, their perspective and their take on things and their experience. You can learn a lot that way. You mentioned like Kendrick Lamar's albums, Rakim. I think as I get older too, though, I try to. This goes into the Homeboy Industries thing. It's like I wish there was just a way for me to get out of the way and put these people up there to tell their
Yeah.
story because like I can digest it, and I think we're in this age of like podcasts. Like podcasts are crazy, bro. Like I was just reflecting on somebody or with a buddy of mine how like the early podcast days were like you like in the early 2010s. Um, you could get content that was a little bit more what's the word? Raw, original, etc. But nowadays I feel like it's just a platform for folks to it's either they're either like overproduced, so they're like practically shows basically that you would like see on TV, or they just give space for people to talk about stuff they have no idea about or analyze things that they really have no idea about. So I try to avoid that, and particularly with like artist lived experience, like I think of I think I saw something on Instagram about like Vince Staples. Like I think Vince Staples makes very interesting music. He has a very interesting story. I think he carries himself in a very unique way. He always kind of has. And for me now, I'm like, go check it out. Go check out that music. You know what I mean? Like I'm a big fan of a guy named Billy Woods, um, who's like, you know, lived experience is quite different than mine, but I find his music so just rich and intricate, and he details he gets into a lot of like history. There's a lot of political themes and motifs in his music. Tends to be a little bit more dark and melancholy, um, but is also a very, very unique artist, and so I encourage folks to go check out him. But other than that, man, I feel like I've honestly just most of what I like listen to nowadays if I go to music, it's reminiscing on stuff that like I grew up with. Like my mom always would play Carlos Santana. She's the biggest Carlos Santana fan ever. Um, and so I'll put on a lot of his music, which um, some of it is more mainstream, but I'll listen to kind of like a more niche stuff that she would be playing like around the house. Or his brother had that band called Malo, which is she loves that album too. And if anything, that kind of music allows me to reflect on uh my own life and kind of upbringing and like different experiences. It takes me back and maybe allows me to help process things or like think through things and like different pieces of growing up. Um, I guess one shout out to a guy whose music maybe he doesn't get as much publicity, but a guy named Navy Blue. I love
Yeah.
that dude's music, man. Like that dude's music is like really something else. And it puts me in a space, like I said, even with a guy like that who has much different experiences than me, it puts me in a space where I can reflect on my own experiences. Like it's weird, I grew up in New Mexico, and like New Mexico has a lot of like tradition and heritage and like um indigenous, and like it's just got a very rich history that I've come to really love as I've gotten older. And his music reminds me a lot of home, a lot of music he makes. And it's cool. So I don't know if that's what you're expecting, but that's a few shout outs I'll give to artists that I
Yeah.
really enjoy.
Yeah, you shared Navy Blue with me a few years ago, and I've really enjoyed some of the stuff that he's put out even since then. Yeah. Um, Kind of in closing here, uh, what you shouted out your um, the doc you're working with for research. You shouted out her book. Uh, your research supervisor. Is there anything else that you're like seeing happening that's exciting you that you want to make people aware of?
Oh, no, you're gonna get me in trouble if I forget something. But I mean, you could check out the work. my mentor Darby. Well, first of all, if you type her name in, Darby Saxbe, she's been doing a lot of media. I think she was on Dax Shepard's podcast like
Yeah.
within the past like several weeks as she was promoting her book. Um, so check her out. She's also got like a Substack you can check out. I'm sounding like a publicist, but really appreciate her. Check out the work we do at the Neuroendocrinology of Social Ties Lab, also known as the Nest Lab at the University of Southern California. You can see the work of myself, my lab mates, and Darby herself. Um, that's pretty much it. And yeah, I guess to reiterate, I've been supported by a lot of really cool institutions, USC, UCLA, and then obviously volunteered at Homeboy Industries. Um, for Homeboy Industries specifically, go check them out. Go check them out. Like what I put into words can't live up to the folks like just genuinely sharing their stories. And you can get a lot of that through like Father Greg's books on their YouTube page. They're very welcome to folks who even want to come visit if you're in the LA area. Like they do tours and stuff off Bruno Street, where the Homeboy Industries main location is, just east of Chinatown. They'd probably be welcome to have you. They have a homegirl cafe. You can get some delicious food, pastries, wonderful hospitality. So I'll just give one more shout out to Homeboy Industries. And that's pretty much it, man. I think that's all I have to say.
Heck yeah. Thanks for joining me. Again, all of our any conversation we have, no matter how long it's been, is always just so I think the word I would use is invigorating. Like it makes me feel um excited and teaches me things and um helps me reflect more deeply on what's going on in my own life. And yeah, appreciate you, man.
Hey, man. Yeah, dude, I appreciate you. You've been a good friend for a long time, and I think you mentioned it before, but I feel like we just got kindred spirits. I think we can connect on a lot of dimensions. So very grateful for you, dude. And it's cool to see you doing. Sounds like you're doing wonderful work. So I love that.